All right, um, we're going to start getting this owl roughed out. We've got a bandsaw blank here that's been compound cut. We cut the side view first on the bandsaw, then I used a jig to cut the back view. This is something we can do in a separate video. But the first thing that we want to do, oh, and the one that we cut already, we've got a center line drawn in. I did that all around before I cut this blank out on the bandsaw. Next, what I want to do is I want to establish some other reference lines on the pattern. And one of the first and most important ones is to get the template lined up. I just took the regular pattern here and I cut out the template here. Now what I want to do is I want to draw in where the center line is on the top like this. And then I can take a little pin, just a little sharp pin like this, and use that to poke a little dot right at the tip of the bill. And that will, you can see there's a little dot there. So what I can do now is I can extend this line down. This will be the center line down the middle of the head. And you can also extend that straight down. It just goes at right angles and just goes off to the back of the head here, like that. So that's the down to the tip of the bill. Then the other thing that we really want to make sure is done accurately is we want to mark in where the inside of the eyes are. Okay, so little pinhole there, little pinhole there to indicate where the inside of the eyes are. And I'll put another little mark there where the outside of the eyes are, like that. So I've got the inside and the outside of the eyes marked. Any other reference that you might want to put on, you can, like you could mark in with a marker where the eyebrows are, various things like that. Um, but that's not, so the first and most important thing that you'll need to do is to get these eyes drawn in. So I want to draw in the location and the shape of the eyes. These need to be holes drilled or kind of carved into the bird later on to accommodate a 12 millimeter eye. So I'm just getting the location of those eyes put in. This is the most important thing in carving an owl is getting the eyes in correctly. The biggest mistake I see when I see owl carvings in shows and that kind of stuff is people just don't get the eyes in the right location, the right position, the right depth, and they run into all kinds of problems as a result. The next thing that you want to do is to take a side template of the owl, and I didn't get one cut out here before the video, so I'm just going to pause while I cut out another template of the, just to pause this as I cut out another template here. So now that I've got this, there we go. Now that I've got this template cut out, I can just lay that on the side view and take my pin like this and just poke two holes in here, one at the back corner of the eye, one at the front corner of the eye, and mark these two locations in like that. That's the front of the eye, that's the back of the eye. So now what I need to do when I start carving here, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to go from the eye here and here. I need to create a channel down inside here somewhere, like straight down from there and straight in from here is where the eye is going to be located. So the other thing that you can do, instead of laying the template right on here, you could potentially take a caliper like this and measure how far back the front part of the eye and how far back the back, and you just kind of go from there. You can see how that works, to mark in the location of the eye. And so what we need to do is just extend these lines out like that. And I can do the same thing on the back side of this because I'll line this up and I already poked a couple of holes through here, so I just use the old holes. And this will allow me to determine the back of the eye and the front of the eye because the eyes are angled in the head here. So this is getting that drawn in properly is really, really important. The position of the eye looking at it from the side and the position of the eyes looking at it from the front is very, very important. And then what we're going to be doing next is we're going to be carving down until we locate the location of those eyes. So turn on the dust collector here. I'm going to use a small uh, saber-tooth burr, ball-nose saber-tooth burr here. That's what I'm going to utilize um, for this particular step. What I want to do is I want to carve straight down and straight down, straight in, just like I'm almost drilling it down. But I go right across. It goes straight down, and I go until I hit this front point here, this first line. So I'm removing, effectively, what I'm doing is I'm removing all of this wood here like that to create a straight in, straight down. I'll be establishing the eye positions. Something else that might be useful for you is just to mark in the outside corners of these eyes, just so that when you carve in this area here, you've still got some lines left that you can refer to draw the eyes back in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this typhoon burr, or sorry, I'm going to take the saber-tooth burr here. They say typhoon burrs are the same basic burr. Typhoon makes burrs that are the same shape and size and work the same way. We just saber tooths are what we use in our classroom. Not pushing very hard. You see, it's a ball nose burr, and using the end of it works really quite well for getting in some little tighter areas. So you can see I'm coming in there. Thing that I like to do, and it doesn't matter if you get a little bit more on the outside. You know, if you remove a little bit more on the outside isn't really a problem. As long as you're going in the full depth. So you can see here on the side, I'm carving right down to my line. I don't want to leave any extra in there. I want to carve right down to that pencil line. Now my goal is the cut from here should be straight in, absolutely straight in from there. And from the side, it should be absolutely straight in as well. So make sure that you look at it straight from the side here, there's no lumps or bumps or anything sticking out. Now, this being a ball nose burr, I can't get a really, really square inside corner in here. It's going to be slightly rounded. And that's not a bad thing. That's, kind of keep things safe so you don't have any gouges in the inside corners there. But once I've got that carved in that way, I can actually switch to a smaller cutter. And this other little saber tooth, there's a little cylinder there. And I can use this little saber tooth now to come in here and just kind of clean things up a little bit. Kind of refine that inside corner. So this is what I want. When you look at that from the side, you see I'm straight in. I've come straight in this way. And from the front corner of the eye here, I've come straight in. So now what I've effectively done is I have established the eye location, looking at it from the front here. That's where the eye is now. I moved it in and into here. Now, because this eye is angled, this front part here is closer to the front of the bill, and the back part is angled in a little bit, kind of this way. To establish that angle on the eye, what I can do is I can carve straight down from here and straight into there, like this, and remove this wood in here. And that will give me the depth on the outside of the eye, the proper depth on the outside of the eye. So I can go back in with my larger ball nose here, like this. And I want to go straight in this way and straight in this way. Now, I'm not worried about making the eye round at this point. Like that, the fact that this is a little flat side down in here really isn't a problem. Um, so after I get that carved in that way, I've kind of gone straight in the side and straight down from the front. Then I'll switch over to my smaller cutter here and do that bit of cleanup that I did before. I'm running these bits at about 30,000 RPM right now. Whatever feels comfortable for you. So that kind of cleaned up these corners here a little bit. So now you can see I'm going straight in from the side. So you can see that little shelf. That's where the eye is going to be. So that eye will end up, when we round everything off, that eye will end up being at the appropriate angle. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pause things for a bit here, and I'm going to go and carve the other side. And I'll go and carve the other side, and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've carved in the other side using the two little saber-tooth burrs, the ball nose and the long skinny one. And what I've done here is I've established the position of the eyes. So that's probably the most important thing in terms of getting everything looking right on your owl. There's a number of ways people go about establishing the eyes on owls. Sometimes they work with different angles and things like that. But I found this to be a pretty objective way of checking it, or of getting them carved properly. Now, the other thing that you can do as a double check, just to make sure everything looks good, is you can take your template here, and you can measure, how far the eye goes down. Like you can use a caliper like this. Most of these calipers have a little tab that sticks out the back. So if you took this caliper and measured how far to the back of the eye like this, you can see that if you rest that against the front of the owl here, I'm a tiny bit deeper, but I'm very, very close. this will also help you determine, okay, this side is down that far from the front brow, and the other side is lower. Where I'm really concerned is not so much on the outside here, but right on the inside edge of the eye. So I can actually put that little tab down there right in the corner like that and push this down until it catches on the edge. Then I can check and see how that compares to the other side here. It looks like I'm deeper on one side than the other, noticeably deeper. So this side is deeper than this side. Um, if I double check, and the ideal should be right around like this. That should be pretty close to the ideal for where I want to be. So I see on this one, I'm a little deeper. On this side, maybe even a little shallow. So I can come in on this side and clean that up, just make it a tiny bit deeper in there. The other thing I can do is I can check and see how the eyes themselves compare. So I can take this and push that down onto the eye, and then take the same thing on the other side. You can see this eye isn't near as deep as this one is. These are your double checks. So this is ideal. So this one's actually a tiny bit deep. This one looks like it's pretty close to perfect there. So for the sake of for the sake of making them even, I'm going to bring this side down just a little bit more. It's got to come down just maybe a tenth of an inch, not a huge amount. So what I'll do is I'll use the little cutter here. Just come in and take this down. So when I'm doing something like this, I'll just take it down about that tenth of an inch on one side. And when I like what I've got, that's about a tenth of an inch or so. And I could just check and see, take a second here and check and see how these compare now. My caliper down there, put them down there. It's getting really close. I'll maybe come down just a teeny little bit more. Definitely want to avoid the scenario where you come down too far and then you got to try to take the other side down and you keep running into problems. So definitely don't want that to happen. But oh, let's see how that does. Looks about perfect. So now I'm just going to come in here on this inside to clean that up a little bit. So the whole level of the eye is flat. So now these should be the same on both sides. And I want to bring this one in just about the same amount that I bring this one down, just about the same amount that I took the eye down. Do it on the outside here, although I'm not quite to the outside there, but okay, let's take that in. See how we're doing it. Just got to come down a little tiny bit more. That should be just about perfect. And now what I'll do is I'll just get in here and clean up this little. This is a very technical thing. I'm being kind of picky, making sure we're exact, but we're talking about the eyes here. So now if I measure yeah, it looks virtually perfect now. Yeah, they're very, very similar now. So I've got a, I'm not going to have one eye sticking out. One of the other philosophies I've always had in carving birds is you don't see a lot of real perfect symmetry in nature. So I'm not worried about making everything perfectly symmetrical, but I do want to make sure that I don't make them look lopsided. Like that's the important thing. So once you've got that cut out like that, once you've got the eyes established, and this is really the most important thing in the whole carving is getting that. And I know a lot of people, if they're just carving on their own at home, would not do this. It looks like you've maybe created a problem. It doesn't look that great right now, but trust me, it will work out. So the next thing we need to do is to establish the widest point on the bird. Establish a line on here that's going to indicate what the widest point of the bird is. We've already got a center line drawn in here, and this center line would indicate what the silhouette, the thickest point of the bird, if you will, when you're looking at it from the side. This line would form the silhouette. This is actually kind of a sacred line. You don't want to cut through this line, not deliberately. When you're completely finished rounding off this bird, this line should, in theory, still be intact. And now we need one for the side view. And what that on most birds, that comprises the lower edge of the wing, of the wide edge here, and then outer edge of the wing, and then the outer edge of the tail is going to be the widest point on the bird. So a lot of times it's really helpful to take a pin again and just go in and mark with some dots where that upper edge of the side pocket comes around, and then you can realign this wingtip like so it lines up down here, and you can just put in a few little dots along that edge. And you also want to put in a really good little mark here where the base of that tail is, so that you can draw this line in on the outer lower edge of the tail. It's kind of the first thing that I do is I'll just come in here, follow the lower edge of this tail into that line. And then this one here, the center line from the bill comes down to here and just follows your little dots out to the end of the wingtip like that. So now we've drawn let's be the widest point of the bird. We have to go around and do that same thing on the back. We've got the center line on the head, which would be the widest point on the head. If you look at it from the side, that line will be the widest point on the head. Everything else will be round from there. So then what we want to do is just to take this template, because I've already poked a bunch of holes in it. We line them up here like this. And we can use this to mark in where the upper edge of that side pocket is. And then once I get down about halfway, I'll pull this down and line it up with the wingtip again and the tail. Put that mark in where the base of the tail is going to have a really nice dark one. A real distinct pinprick there. Draw this line from the edge up into the base there. I'm just kind of playing connect the dots now. One thing about this is that when you're doing these kinds of things, these are they're indicators of various feather groups. Like this is the upper edge of the side pocket feathers, and you can see where these side feathers kind of come and wrap around on the bird. And these can move a little bit. The wing can actually lift out and sit up over top of those feathers, or those feathers can sit up over top of the wing. There's a number of different things that can happen in there. So it's a little bit more forgiving. If you get it a little bit up or down one way or the other, that's not going to hurt the overall look of the bird. So now we have enough information here drawn in and enough reference lines. We've carved in those eye lines. We've got enough other reference. So now what we can do is we can actually round off the whole bird. What I would recommend is that, oh, there's one other thing that I guess would be a really good idea for you to put on, and that is at the wingtips here. You look at this outer edge of the blank comes along here and then comes to a point top. So you can follow that along and see where your center line is. This just follows along like that to create your wingtips. This line continues along this outer edge here. General rule of thumb, general philosophy that I've got in carving most birds is I don't round things off on the bird. I don't start rounding things until I absolutely have to. And so there's one cut that we're going to make here before we start rounding things off, and that's going to be to get rid of all this wood on the outside of the wingtips and above the tail. So it's like this wood here. Like that. So all of this stuff's going to come off. See how that's going to work. And I can just use the same. I could use this little guy here. In fact, maybe I will. I'll just use the little one for the whole thing here. You find it easier to use something bigger, or you could use a knife and a gouge. If you want to use hand tools, you don't have to use this exact cutter. You're working with hand tools. It's not the tool that you use so much as what the step looks like when you're finished carving. The most important thing here is just getting the silhouette of this outer wing thing here established. That's the most important thing. Clean that up. And on the other side here. Yeah, I'm not pushing very hard. I'm just kind of letting the cutter do the work for me. Find if you start pushing hard, you can run into all kinds of little issues and problems. Now, you could actually use what some people do if they don't have a cutter like this. Uh, just use a 1/2-inch sanding drum like this would do a really nice job of getting in there and cleaning everything up. So that's another thing. These little sanding drums are the most underrated tools you'll ever have. But one thing that I do recommend though is when you're using a sanding drum like this to loosen it off and pull the drum out just a little bit so that it's sticking out proud of the screw. Because if this screw is sticking out of the end, it's going to chew into stuff. But if you just move the drum out a little bit, you'll find that it's a much more useful little cutter that way. So extra little tip there. So now I've got this established. The next thing that I need to do is I'm going to be roughing out the entire body. I'm going to be rounding everything off.